Hi folks, Carl James here from Electric Media Madness, and what can I say to begin with other than I'm shocked? I'm going to say something right off the bat that may be considered controversial for many people currently eyeing the current state of contemporary Doctor Who. I actually think this is a reasonably good episode of the Chris Chibnall era of Doctor Who. Wonders will never cease. So, we're at episode 4 of Doctor Who's 12th season, and a story entitled Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, and this was the episode that I was perhaps dreading watching the most out of the new run of Doctor Who, primarily because of how I believe the BBC would depict the work of Nikola Tesla in this story, how it would conflict with what I've come to know about Tesla during my years as an alternative knowledge researcher. Nikola Tesla's name crops up a hell of a lot in my research. Much of his work, discoveries and inventions were, and still are, historically, theoretically and practically muddled up beyond all recognition, and in many cases wholly ignored by the mainstream media, history, academia. Key areas of Tesla's work that mostly gets ignored or overlooked is his research into free energy technology, but I will come back to that subject at the conclusion of this video. I don't want to scare off the casual viewers right from the get-go. So, let's jump into a brief overview of the plot of the episode at this point. We begin in Niagara Falls in 1903 and witness Nikola Tesla's failed attempts to get financial investment in his wireless power transmission system. Tesla's working late and encounters a floating ball of glowing energy. A cloaked figure then appears and starts shooting at Tesla and his assistant Dorothy Skerritt. The Doctor then appears and helps the pair escape on a train bound for New York. Their attacker pursues them, but they're able to elude him by detaching the train car he's in. Tesla, Skerritt, the Doctor and her fam arrive in New York to see protesters outside Tesla's lab. And it appears that these protesters have been provoked by Tesla's arch-rival Thomas Edison. The Doctor says that the glowing ball is the Orb of Thassa, a knowledge device that's been retooled for an unknown purpose. The Doctor, Graham and Ryan visit Edison and question him to see if he was responsible for the attack on Tesla. Next, the cloaked figure reappears and kills pretty much everybody in Edison's workshop. The Doctor, her fam and Edison escape. The Doctor tries to warn Tesla and Yaz back at Tesla's lab, however the two are captured and beamed aboard an invisible Skithra spaceship above the city. They meet the Queen of the Skithra, who demands that they fix her broken spaceship. Tesla says no, and the Queen threatens to kill Yaz, when suddenly the Doctor appears. The Doctor learns that the Skithra chose Tesla because he intercepted their transmission via his wireless power system. The group escape and arrive at Tesla's Wardenclyffe lab. The Skithra Queen doggedly pursues them, demanding that they repair her ship. If they don't, she's going to destroy the Earth. They decide to use Wardenclyffe Tower as an energy weapon to destroy the ship. Tesla and the Doctor work to hook up the power from the TARDIS to the tower, whilst the others fend off an attack from the Queen's Skithra minions. The tower is activated, manages to damage the ship to such a degree that the Skithra retreat from Earth. The group muse about how history will never really fully recognise how great Tesla was, but the Doctor reminds them that a world of wireless energy will be realised one day in the not too distant future. And this episode did baffle me because I was all set for Tesla to be portrayed as yet another white man bad in this episode. And yet, despite a few really odd digs at Tesla that the writer obviously couldn't resist including, Tesla was left rather unscathed by the BBC's current year identity politics agenda. In some regards, I think they let him off the hook by doing such things as emphasising that Tesla was an immigrant and that he wasn't in the least bit misogynistic towards women, although Tesla was very positive about women for most of his life. He did voice some concerns in the later years of his life that he could foresee a day when women would completely take over society and lose any shred of femininity in the process. Surprise, surprise, none of that's mentioned here in this episode though. The most bizarre thing about this episode came in the first few minutes when the Doctor meets Tesla, and she gushes about how she's always wanted to meet him, and then immediately shouts at him, "Shame you're a big fat liar." Seconds later, she says it again, "Not so fast, you big fat liar." Seeing this, I can only assume that somebody involved in the production of the episode really wanted the Doctor to be incredibly insulting towards the clever white man and put him in his proverbial place. But then we get an offhand remark that the Doctor thinks he's a liar because he didn't reveal the fact that he'd found the Orb of Thassa. It doesn't, however, explain why Jodie Whittaker almost spat these lines at the actor that was playing Tesla. It's a very, very strange scene. And it's kind of glossed over there, and there's nothing more to that, really. But I initially thought that this had set the tone for how Tesla was going to be treated in this episode. And the rest of this show was relatively kind to Tesla, actually. There's one other scene aboard the Skithra ship, but it's a little more subtle, surprising, something of a surprise for the BBC. The Doctor tries to save hers and Yaz's life, and she convinces the Queen that the two are very clever. But in doing this, she backhandedly belittles Tesla and says, "You think Tesla's clever? We make him look like the village idiot." And I will grudgingly accept the fact that the Doctor is almost certainly cleverer than Tesla, but Yaz? I don't think so somehow. There's one other tiny little dig at Tesla when Graham says to Edison, "Careful, people will think you're as crazy as Tesla." Speaking of Graham, yet again this season, this character has been portrayed as an absolute moron, absolute buffoon, from his pitiful attempt to blag his way through knowledge of Tesla's inventions and then getting chastised by Yaz for failing to do so, to his lacklustre attempt to fire the male genitalia-shaped weapon invented by Tesla. Graham is coming off very, very badly this year, and I can only assume that Graham is being used as a target for man-baiting this season, and it's a shame because Graham was probably the one bright spot of season 11. So what they're doing with him now, I don't know. There's some other digs from the Doctor about how emotionally stunted humanity and the Skithra are. We get a line from the Doctor to the Skithra Queen about how her species had a chance to evolve, but they were too stupid to take it. We also have this weird line about how changing the world takes time, you have to be patient, implying that there's much that needs to change about humanity. And whilst I agree with that sentiment, I'm not thinking of the same things that Jodie Whittaker, Chris Chibnall and the BBC are. Overall, this wasn't an awful episode, certainly not on the scale of Orphan 55. The story, whilst being very simplistic, it's at least consistent and reasonably paced. It had the slight feel of pre-Chibnall era Who story. Pretty respectable for an historical episode as well. I expected a real crapfest against Tesla in this story, to be honest. It's actually one of the things that I was pleasantly surprised by. As for historical accuracy, well, for a change, the BBC didn't do a great stinking turd on the past, and apart from one quite substantial historical lie which I'll come to shortly, they stayed reasonably close to the truth of Tesla's life. The historical errors in this story are largely omissions rather than revisions or outright lies. Nikola Tesla is a controversial historical figure, not really because of who he was, but rather because of what he did. Whilst the writers of this show touched on some of the work he did in his life, there were other aspects that I know the BBC will not touch with the proverbial barge pole because of the implications. And these implications are that the media is complicit in covering up and muddling up all manner of scientific inventions and discoveries from our world's history. If you took this episode at face value, you would go away from it thinking that Tesla was a pioneer in the field of electricity, but little else. Now, Tesla didn't invent alternating current, as many mainstream historical sources would assert. He reinvented it, actually, in the form of polyphase current. Polyphase made brushless motors and bright lighting possible, along with the ability to send electricity great distances without little loss of energy in transit. He also built generators that operated with higher frequency polyphase. He found that high-frequency currents were harmless when coming into contact with the human body. He was the first person to observe shock effect phenomenon that eventually became known as impulse currents or broadcast electricity. And from those impulses, he also documented radiant energy effects, specially designed coils and transformers that allowed him to magnify and wirelessly transmit radiant energy. So official history also blandly paints what happened to Tesla and Edison. Edison's work in the field of electricity was sizably funded by JP Morgan. And I just want to quickly read you something here. I'm not going to get into this territory too much here, but I just want to quickly read you something from this excellent book from 1999 called Lost Science by Jerry Vasilitos. Tesla underestimated the power of media and of opinions in underrating his abilities. He quickly found that public opinion could actually sway scientific opinion. He failed to see who was behind the media campaign. Crookes had been given a true Tesla transformer when Tesla had been given lectures. The small device was potent given the uncharacteristic effects that Tesla had always claimed. This single piece of evidence was left in England for all to see. Remarkably, this evidence did not silence the critics. Tesla could see no reason at all for this. Something did not add up. And then the book continues. JP Morgan's agent approached Tesla with a business proposition. The bribe being sizable, contracts would have placed Morgan in control of Tesla's new system. Tesla laughed, and he was escorted very graciously by the amused Tesla. While dining in the Waldorf several hours later, a rude interruption informed him that his laboratories were ablaze. The connection between his refusal to bow and the flames, which now reached skyward, was not made until it was all consumed. He lost everything. The totality of his technological achievements were burned into vapour. Books, priceless souvenirs, dedicated equipment, patents, models, drawings, new pieces of apparatus, everything was burned. He read the message well. The fire was meant to kill. It was a message as clear as anyone would need. Now, I highly recommend you seek out this book, as it's a great source not only on Tesla, but a number of pioneering inventors whose work has been suppressed over the years. Despite all of the aforementioned, actually Tesla did pick himself up and eventually developed later discoveries in major technologies, ones which the world of mainstream academia, history or media rarely ever talk about. In those years, Tesla worked on special radiation projectors, self-acting heat engines, power transmitters, remote control robotics, the world broadcast system, beam broadcast transmitters, etheric reactors and engines, cosmic ray motors, psychotronic television. The list goes on and on and on. And this is where we get the whopper of this episode of Doctor Who, because we're led to believe that Tesla didn't really invent or successfully work on anything after that period in time. In fact, they more or less imply that he was penniless, broke and died in obscurity. And the reality is that Tesla actually maintained 2 penthouse suites on the top floor of Hotel New Yorker, which was, one of them was converted into a radio laboratory actually. And this was during one of the toughest financial eras of American history, the Depression. Hardly a tale of somebody who never worked again and was left broke and penniless. And he had many more successes in scientific and engineering field before his death. And that's something that the BBC does not tell you. One thing that they also won't tell you is how connected Tesla's work is with free energy technology and directed energy technology, moreover, the weaponization of it. Directed free energy technology is very real, despite what the skeptics and the naysayers out there might say. It evidentially works, it's existed for a very long time, it still exists today, and it's being actively suppressed and covered up by all manner of individuals, entities and organisations. I don't want to alienate any casual viewers here, but I feel an obligation to very, very quickly use one short sentence to point anybody who's curious about this subject, the free energy technology, to the proof of its existence and use. Please check out the evidential research of Dr. Judy Wood. It will be all you need to know on that subject. Now, I know there's going to be people out there watching this and thinking, oh, he's gone all tinfoil hat on us now, he's gone all conspiratorial. Well, if you think that if that's the case, then I may as well just finish with this final thought and say perhaps there's more layered reason why Nikola Tesla was given such a favourable outing in this story. Now, I've done some comprehensive research for 2 volumes of work that I put out several years back, Science Fiction and the Hidden Global Agenda, volumes 1 and 2. And in them, I have evidentially documented many occasions where real phenomenons, ones that have been historically covered up and intentionally misconstrued, have been shifted into a fictional narrative framework in order to discredit the credibility or any evidence that portrays said subject matter in an honest manner. And by doing this, people can then readily point to the fictional portrayal of the said phenomenon and dismiss it as wholly fictional or fantasy with no basis in reality. This has an added effect of delegitimizing anybody who attempts to research and reveal the phenomenon to the general public in any kind of evidential and reality-based manner. And some people call this media effect predictive program or hiding in plain sight. Do I think that the writers of Doctor Who are capable of doing this? Well, I would rarely credit these people with being clever in that way, but I do know that the BBC has operated that way on many other occasions in the past. I wouldn't put it past them to have done something like that here with Doctor Who. Something for you to think about, maybe. I will put this episode of Doctor Who to bed at this point and give it a well-rounded 5 out of 10. I perhaps shouldn't give it such a score given what I know about the way the media work, but I can't help being a sucker for a Tesla story. I love The Prestige, it's a great film. Tesla's a fascinating man, both in the fictional context as well as factually. I still hold out for a tiny smidgen of hope for the day when Doctor Who starts giving us straightforward stories again and lays off all the ham-fisted tokenistic identity politics. I feel that this episode is the closest that we've got to that in some time, but I am sort of damning it with faint praise, I suppose. But there you go. And with that, I will end the video here. My next Doctor Who review will be episode 5, Fugitive of the Jadoon. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and share this video, and if you like my content, subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to click the bell icon for notification of new content, and I will see you in the next video.